No, I think I'm fine. I'm fine. Can I start? Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks.
Can I start?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So first, my name is Jahziel. I did my PhD at UCT, and now I'm an associate professor at the State University of Bukavu. And so I'm going to talk about the artisanal mining activities of cobalt, gold, tin, and tantalum in the DRC. And first, on the global scale, so artisanal mining activities account for almost a quarter of the world production of mineral resources such as gold, diamond, tantalum, tin, and cobalt as of 2019. And during the last 3 decades, we can observe an exponential growth of artisanal mining activities all over the planet. And at the present, 40 millions of people are involved in directly in the artisanal mining activities. And during the last 5 years, over 15 millions of people have joined artisanal mining activities on the planet. And if we can try to compare the DRC and Sub-Saharan Africa, first, Sub-Saharan Africa is very important in the artisanal mining activities because it's one of the big hub of this kind of activities, because over 10 millions of people are involved in the artisanal mining activities in Sub-Saharan Africa. And DRC alone accounts for a fifth of this workforce. So over 2 million of people in the DRC are involved in the artisanal mining activities. And this sector is very critical to the DRC's economy because first, it accounts of from 25% to 100% of the DRC mining output or mining production. So for example, for gold, cobalt, the artisanal mining activities produce 20 to 25% of the production. And for tin and tantalum, this it's almost 100% of so the entire production of the DRC of tin and tantalum is coming from the artisanal mining sector. And also it is noteworthy to mention that gold mining alone accounts for almost 80% of the artisanal mining activities in the DRC. So gold is a major kind of activity, gold production, gold mining in this sector in the DRC. So yeah, another kind of important point here is this sector, the artisanal mining sector, is account also approximately from 20 to 25% of the GDP of the DRC. So it's very critical to the DRC's economy. And we can also mention that this sector employs over 2 million of people. So 2 million of people are involved in this sector. Whereas, for example, for the large scale mining, it's only 300,000 people who work for those big corporations. So in certain circumstances, the artisanal mining sector provide a better income for miners and support larger communities than what does the larger scale mining. So, but there is some challenges, and there are many challenges that the artisanal mining sector in the DRC face. And the biggest one is security issues. So the presence of armed groups in the mining areas, this creates a complex and dangerous environment for the artisanal miners. And the pressure is forced the withdrawal of certain large buyers with an immediate and huge impact on the artisanal mining and trading economy of the Kivu. And in response to this situation, a variety of initiatives have been launched to improve the traceability and certification of minerals and to promote the demilitarization of the mining areas. And also the second biggest challenge is the social and environmental impacts of artisanal mining. So, and this includes the following, for example, migration, substance abuse, health problems, prostitution, child labor, gender discrimination, and so on and so on. And in some cobalt mine during the late 2010, up to 40% of the workers on the mining site could be considered children in the Katanga province. And this terrible situation has led to global awareness and the Cobalt responsible sourcing initiatives. We'll talk about it later. So also the third kind of big challenge is technical and management issues. So right now, artisanal mining in the DRC is carried out inefficiently. And it's because of the following. First, prospection or exploration is carried out on the basis of opportunism, history, rumor, luck, and superstition. So there is no any geological background for that exploration to be done to look for those resources. Second, there is a significant amount of funds that are wasted on inappropriate investment due to the lack of, again, geological knowledge, poor advice, desperation. And third, extraction is done manually using rudimentary techniques and equipment, and this cause lives are put on at risk by dangerous practices, especially in the mining gallery, mining shaft underground. See, again, what we have kind of observed is it is well defined, or there is a well-defined operational hierarchy in this sector in the DRC. So at the bottom, there is diggers. The first group is composed of diggers. It's people who dig the gold. And then the second group is people who crushes the ore, the rocks. The third people is washers. They have to carry out washing and sorting. The fourth group is transporters. These people, they have to transport materials from the mine to the washing site and from the washing site to the depot. The fifth group is commissioners. These have to provide petty cash to artisanal miners as they buy small amount of materials to accumulate, which then again they sell to the negotiant or traders. And then the biggest the powerful group is the founders, people who give money, who fund the operation, the real bosses. And what we have kind of observed is at the bottom, there is little gain, whereas at the top, for these founders, there is high margin, high profit. And this situation has led to some consequences. And the biggest one is there is a mismatch between the mining production, official statistics, and the boom that has been kind of observed in the artisanal mining sector. And the case, for example, in the South Kivu, the province of the South Kivu, during the last decade, 150 new mining sites were discovered. And during the same period of time, 50,000 people joined this sector. But when we look at the production, what we can see is, for example, for gold production, in 2018, the artisanal miners produced 37 kilograms of gold. But in 2019, that went down to 7.8 kilograms. And in the case also for tin and tantalum, for example, in 2018, artisanal miners produced 3.3 tons of tin oxide, whereas in 2019, that went down to 2.9. And also for tantalum, the artisanal miners produced 198 tons of tantalum, and this went down in 2019 to 190 tons. So on one hand, we kind of we've observed artisanal production is on decline, and on the other hand, their artisanal activities are on the rise. So something is not right, and what we have found is this mismatch between the mining production, so official statistics, and the boom is largely due to the fraud on a larger scale. And according to recent studies, the ACM, so the SAM, the artisanal mining activity in the DRC, produces more than 10 tons of gold per year, most of which get out of the country by fraud. And also we have, this has kind of led us to write to the government and to see that there is a huge need to organize and formalize this sector in the DRC. And it has been shown that when mining income is invested back to the community, it can become a driver of economic growth for other sectors such as agriculture, livestock, or health. And this requires capacity building of individuals to properly harness these opportunities. And we have been working on this project recently at the State University of Bukavu, where I work right now. But everything is not that bad. So many progress have been done so far in this sector. And for example, this artisanal mining sector has contributed largely to poverty alleviation, employment, livelihood, wealth creation during the last decade by the widespread establishment of mining cooperatives. And if you can come to the DRC, to the eastern of the DRC, there is two big cities, Bukavu and Goma, which, there is prosperity, economic prosperity in those cities because of the artisanal mining sector. And also in 2015, for example, in 2015, there was 56% of mining sites that were occupied by armed groups, those rebel and militias. But now that kind of percentage went down to 35% in 2018. So there is progress that has been done. So the future of this sector can be bright if there is appropriate support from all the stakeholders. Thank you. I'm done from our presentation.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's always a troubling hierarchy to recognize what is actually going on with artisanal mining, and I really appreciate your contribution, especially leaving it on a positive note, because I do think that this sector has a lot of potential and throughout the African continent. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Robert, would you mind turning on your video? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Robert Bitumba. I'm country director of a company called Project Director on a global responsible project. And then I'm also an auditor for responsible mining. Yeah, I'll be talking about the practical side. Thanks, Jahziel, for the introductory presentation of artisanal mining, especially in DRC. I'm going to share some slides that I have prepared for this forum. Yeah, I hope everybody is able to see the slide. Yeah, a bit of history regarding artisanal mining sector. In the early 1960s, artisanal mining were recognized by the law, but not practical measures put in place. So in 1982, the president issued a decree authorizing artisanal mining officially. The main export activities, production activities started to take place in the diamond sector, but also in colored gems and gold. And in late 80s and 90s, people starting to export copper and cobalt mineral, mainly from the south of DRC. After the biggest company, mining company in the DRC called Gécamine had a crisis. And in the east, it was quite at the same moment, Sominki, that used to produce tin, also have some issues. And then artisanal miners started to exploit the concessions that were previously allocated to Sominki. As Jahziel mentioned, approximately 20% of the export of copper, cobalt are coming from artisanal mining. And then, the 3TG mainly from artisanal mining, even though Alphamin is putting in place industrial production of tin in the North Kivu. But gold, there's a lot of industrial production taking place also in the east part. So generally they say DRC have a mineral curse because minerals are found almost everywhere. The main places by category of mineral, it's Central DRC for the diamond, and also in the east part of, on the western part of DRC, close to the border with Angola, Bandundu area, and in the northern part, close to Aketi and Kisangani. For cobalt, mainly it's the copper belt that goes from DRC to Zambia. This is the southern part of DRC. For the 3TG, it is taking place in the eastern DRC, starting from the north, close to the border with South Sudan, to the north of Katanga. What is the context in the 3TG? By the way, this is a view from the Lake Kivu, where a lot of mining 3TG activities are taking place. People noticed that during the war that took place in the late 90s in Eastern DRC, the mapping of the war areas and the mapping of artisanal mining activities were very correlated. This is how a lot of initiatives were taken at international level, starting with the Dodd-Frank law in United States. Some of the people call it Obama law, where it was banned to import product from DRC and the neighboring country for the 3TG mineral. And in 2010, 2011, OECD issued some guidelines in order to put in place mechanism that will allow people to export despite the Dodd-Frank law. At the same time, we notice initiative standards that enable treatment unit and refiners to be audited, like the CFSI previously, but now called RMI, Responsible Mineral Initiative. At a regional level, the Chief of State of Central Africa met in Lusaka. Following that meeting, there were consensus that people needed to put in place mechanism at a regional level that will enable a kind of control to avoid money coming from the artisanal mining to fuel war in the Eastern DRC and the neighboring country. This is how they put in place what is called the regional certification mechanism by the ICGLR. This is the Great Lake region kind of association. So this is basically, if you want to produce tin or casterite or tantalum, you need to produce it on a validated site that is been checked, and a green light have been given as regarding security, rebel activity, human rights activity on the site. And following that, all the minerals that are produced need to be traced. And before export, check must be done. And if it's positive, then the minerals are certified and can be exported. At national level, there was a suspension of all ISM activity by the president at that time in 2010. and he requested all actors in artisanal mining, especially in the East, to sign commitment that they will abide by the regional and national law. And then in 2002, the mining code, the previous one, was issued. There was also a general manual of traceability that was published in 2009. So in practice, what this requires is that you need to implement due diligence in production and trade of 3TG mineral. The main guidelines are coming from the OECD, but they are by sectors. There are also particular specific guidelines. For instance, for gold with the LBMA, and then for the 3T, there's RMI, as I mentioned before. At regional level, there's the certification mechanism with the ICGLR, and then validation of sites and due diligence implementation. At the same time, the providers of due diligence, starting with the implementation, the most known are ITSKI for tin and Tantalum, and BSP. That is one of the programs that we implement in DRC, BSP, Better Sourcing Program. So basically what we're doing is to have bags that are tagged, and once they are tagged, they can be controlled. We make sure that nobody can tamper them, and we can now follow them from the production site to the export formalities, and make sure that we know all the players that came in touch with the consignment. There were some successes. We will start with access to international market. As I mentioned, banned exports were banned in 2010, but with the initiative that were taking place, it was the mineral coming from DRC can put again access to international market. A formalization of different activity, a decrease, there's a typo there, a decrease in human rights abuses, child labor, a demilitarization of different areas, especially in the eastern part, with the help of United States contingencies. A lot of risk mitigation. There were, for instance, special police agents that were totally dedicated to the mining activity. There have been some tripartite forums at provincial or national level. The most known are the CPS, the IDAC, and CLS. And then also try to intervene at local communities level with what they call the basket fund. Every export, there's an amount of money that is taken on every export of 3T consignment. And then this amount of money will help with implementing some social projects in the local communities. But there are still some challenges. Sorry. Still some challenges. One of the main are the downstream actors are not participating in the risk mitigation. So the importers have given some condition. So some risks have to be mitigated at local level, but they are not paying for the mitigation of those funds. The due diligence implementation is costly, and the burden is given to upstream actors and the miners who earn a little but have to pay a high cost for that. And fair distribution along the value chain. The miners are the less paid, and the exporter are taking the biggest slice of the biggest slice of all the incomes. The size of the country, DRC, is very big, and there's no enough financial or human resources to cover all the mine sites. But as a matter of fact, almost 800 sites have been validated so far, out of plus or minus 2,000 sites all over the country. There are some difficulty to get rid of cross-border fraud. Neighboring countries are taxing almost 0% at export, and this is attracting a lot of smugglers, especially for the gold sector. I was attending a conference 2 weeks ago where, for instance, Uganda mentioned that they reported in the first term of 2019, 2.5 billion income at export level, but the production level, it's almost 19 tons. That is a little less than 1 billion. You see, the difference is some minerals that are not identified, that are not produced in Uganda, but are exported from Uganda. And there's a poor knowledge transfer. Initially, it was expected that after a while, cooperative will be able to conduct their proper due diligence, but it hasn't happened after more than 10 years of those initiatives. In the south of DRC, the copper and cobalt with a different context compared to the eastern part. Copper and cobalt in the south of DRC, there are no conflicts, but the issue here is that there was a huge demand in cobalt following the electronic vehicle boom and all the gadgets, electronic gadgets. So DRC being considered as a CARAS, so a high risk area, OECD and all international NGOs starting to put pressure on the production of copper and cobalt. At international level, there was a lot of pressure with a documentary on child abuse, child labor in cobalt mine site, and a lot of reports from different NGOs. So the 5-step guidelines of the OECD was the Chinese were reluctant to implement the 5 steps guideline, but eventually came to agreed on a slightly changed version by the CCCMC. And a lot of also international initiative like the RMI with Cobalt standard that was compulsory in 2020. There's an initiative called ICA that will be compulsory. This is for the copper mineral. Will be compulsory in 2023 for all exporters on the traders on the LME market, and the EU standard that will be implemented in 2021. At regional level, no coordinated action, and at national level, conflicting views. People in the South considering that it is not a conflict area, they didn't want to implement due diligence. So far, no third-party traceability or due diligence taking place, but the mining code, the revised mining code, trying to enforce implementation. So there's still some debate, but more and more people are trying to put due diligence also in the copper and cobalt sector. So a lot of challenges, but also some good news happening in the south as well for copper and cobalt. As I mentioned, it is not a conflict area, but due diligence have to be implemented because of the vulnerable persons that are involved in artisanal mining. At national and international level, a lot of initiatives that I mentioned previously. And there's also a challenge. On the picture you can see this is a residential area. It used to be a residential area, but people were relocated because of the mining activity that were taking place. So basically you have people residing on in an area that and discovered that 2 or 3 meters down the underground there's mineral. So they start digging in their own compound. So everything needs to be formalized. So a lot of NGOs are putting pressure so that people can at least identify the origin of mineral so that they can make sure that they are producing and trading mineral responsibly. A lack of reserve estimation because these are local individuals who are just trying to make ends meet, and no regulation is taking place, no formalization taking place. And the strategy is to try to limit artisanal mining by relocating artisanal mining sites, by relocating where possible, and formalizing production sites. So recently, a lot of governance and improvement and state engagement are taking place. The government have issued a revised mining code and what is called the CTC, Supply Chain Initiative, to try to regulate also the artisanal mining, especially in the copper and cobalt sector. Like they say in DRC and the Swahili part, Asante. This is meaning thank you.
And thank you so much. I can see why we need another session to go in deeper to these topics, because yeah, luckily we're going to have all 3 panelists back on the 24th, so the last forum of July, to speak on how to harness these infrastructure developments in the current climate of COVID-19 and how we're going to utilize that. So I'm excited to also hear from you on that point. But without further ado, I'd like to invite Christian to turn on his video and take the floor.
Hi everyone.
Hello. Fortunately, I can't see you. Maybe it's just on my side. Hello?
Hello.
I can see your video is on, but I can't see anything.
Let's fix it.
Are you able to see us?
Yeah, I can see you and everyone.
stop your video and try and start it again from my side.
Okay. Let me just do
And
it
then
again.
see how. Otherwise, we can just continue without the video for now.
Oh, okay.
Jochen asks whether there's someone doing dishes in the background.
Well, okay. Thank you very much, Aysha. So regarding the legal and regulatory framework of SME and global trends, yeah. Yeah, and global trend on political side, as mentioned, Roberts, we've seen different initiative on G8 in 2007, in 2008, in 2009, and 2011, and 2013. At UN level, at the UN Security Council, we've seen resolution on the DRC in 2009, 2010, in 2011, 2012, and 2013 and 14, 15 and 16, including, for instance, Ivory Coast in 2013, 14, and 15. So at the regional level in Central Africa, we've seen head of state in a declaration in 2010, and of course the OECD Council recommendation in 2011. And then we have the EU Parliament with a CSR strategy and Commission a statement on raw material. And finally, China OECD program on work. At legal sides, also Robert mentioned it, we've seen the section 1502 of US Dodd-Frank Act, conflict mineral reporting. We've seen the EU regulation on responsible mineral supply chain. We've seen the legal requirement in the DRC, Rwanda, Burundi, and Uganda. I will give more detail on the DRC. The conflict mineral bills in Canada, relevant legislation on forced labor, child labor in UK and US, and the China National Standard and Decree. On regulatory side, for the DRC, the mining code in 2002, actually the same consultant who was working on Madagascar is the one who's been working for the DRC. So the templates, they use it almost the same. And during the debate at the parliament in Lubumbashi, we've seen civil society and different task force of artisan and miner. They came and,
Sorry to interrupt you. There's a fair amount of background noise. Is there somewhere, or could you try and see if the person that's coming through in the background maybe just
okay.
Give it a pause. Sorry.
Okay.
As is the way that we have to navigate these things online, everyone's still stuck inside. I have my dog barking in the background every now and then.
No, sorry for the noise. Yeah.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
So, yeah. So it was very, very interesting to see the debate at the parliament and bringing, they wanted to insert in the mining code clear provision of dealing with artisanal mine in the DRC. So yes, in the 2002 mining code, we have clear provision of who is going to do what and when in terms of artisanal mining. So we define what we call as a digger. So usually the Congolese citizen. And you also have what we call traders. So they need to be, they can be Congolese or foreigners. And we have a buying counter and a mining cooperative. So members of the mining cooperative are actually diggers. And the owner of a buying counter, it's actually traders. They can be Congolese or foreigners. So at institutional level, we do have key responsibilities and liability with the governor of each provinces and the provincial minister. We have a structure where we have at provincial level, a minister is dealing with this kind of activities, providing to diggers, card, etc., etc. And we also do have a very specialized structure, which is dealing with statistics and how to organize actually different activities of diggers and artisanal activity in the DRC. And the regulation, the 2002 regulation, even insert in addendum of the said regulation, a code of conduct of diggers, how they need to do, how to avoid being exposed to environmental issues, etc., etc. So there's a debate actually, and different scholars thinking about coexistence of SME and mining company. So FME and mining company, in terms of key point, need to note that SME and mining company coexist in Eastern DRC since several decades. Linkage between these two sectors have mainly been driven by social and environmental rather than economic development concern, reflecting the interest and power relation between different actors on the ground. At the same time, going beyond such practice and looking at how best to exploit linkage and synergy between SME and mining company sector is critical to foster the economic transformation agenda. For example, we've seen in countries like Ghana and Zimbabwe, this kind of thing happening. It's also interesting to note that working in partnership with different NGO and like PACT on the ground and different actors improve significantly actually the way people are starting looking at SME in the DRC, especially with different part of the DRC in Katanga region, in Kolwezi, where we have different companies now complying with different regulation. I think you've noticed that the London Metal Exchange recently released information regarding SME. They will postpone the plan to ban metal tainted by human rights abuses until 2025, giving producers 3 more years to comply with guidelines and the exchange time to rethink its approach, industry sources said. Under the initial plan announced in April, the exchange had set 2022 as the deadline to buy metal from the LME list of approved brands whose extraction involved abuse such as child labor and which was tainted by corruption. You should also note that we reviewed in 2018 the mining code, and there are clear provision within the mining code talking about strategic minerals such as cobalt. And the government just released recently 2 important decrees in terms of how they're going to formalize the SME activity regarding cobalt. So they set up a public company who will be buying exclusively cobalt from diggers. There's a debate among traders and cooperative mining cooperative regarding such decree, and the FME and the World Bank sent recently consultant to review such decree in the way to comply with international best practice. So that's it from our part.
Thank you so much. So we have a few questions from the chat, and we have a few in a hand up. Let me just scroll through the chat quickly, but Jahziel, would you mind starting us off just speaking to Tantazile's question and your response in the chat, so those that have missed it might just pick up the discussion that's been had?
Yes, I can do that. So the question of Tandazile is, to what extent do the artisanal miners beneficiate, and do you see any sharing of knowledge with regards to processing between ACM and LSM? So my response, I was just saying that there is little, kind of benefit. Artisanal miners reap little, and they are at the bottom of the chain of this, the chain in the artisanal mining sector. So they don't really gain that much. They don't really have the kind of, in terms of income, it's very little. So therefore the governments kind of encourage those miners to gather and to form mining cooperative, which are a group of artisanal miners together. And then these cooperatives can have loans from the banks, and they can therefore buy adequate kind of equipment, and then production will just rise significantly, and then they will have also more profit margin, and they will have more gain. So that's, and also for the second part of the question, so there is kind of a little sharing of knowledge in terms of mineral processing between the kind of artisanal kind of miners and large scale kind of mining companies. So they don't really kind of collaborate, because they tend to have big conflict between the two groups, because they tend to share the same mining concession. So we don't really have this kind of sharing of knowledge. It's not that much. So my input.
Thank you. We have two questions for Robert. The first question is, what does access to international markets mean exactly? What do we have any numbers that can back up what you mean by access? And then the second question is there an independent law regulating artisanal mining in the DRC? Both to Robert.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Regarding access to international market, with the Dodd-Frank law, there was not really a ban, if you have to be strict on the legal terms, but there were recommendations that were given to American company to trace all the mineral coming from Central Africa. And if they had any part of the substances they are using originating from Central Africa, they needed to justify that there were due diligence that took place during the production and traceability. So for American, it became cumbersome to go into details. For instance, you are a car manufacturer and you have paint. In paint, there may be traces of the 3T mineral. So you need to make sure that in your supply chain, there's no mineral that came from DRC. If there's any trace, then you need to justify the due diligence. So since there were no initiative taking place at that time, people starting to avoid any mineral coming from DRC and the neighboring country. So once there were initiatives implemented at local level, it make it easier for people to demonstrate that due diligence were taking place at the production and trading level. This is what I mean by access to international market. Yeah, so there was an embargo, and then after the initiative were implemented, people could export easily, but just needed to justify with a certificate and the due diligence report in order to access international market. Yeah. And for the numbers, unfortunately, I didn't prepare all the numbers because Jahziel was working on the statistic and so on. But I can share with you. But since they reopen, we have hundreds of tons of treaty being exported from DRC. Treaty are mainly artisanal produced. But for the cobalt, as I mentioned, we have copper, cobalt, almost 1 million tons of copper exported. 20% of it is believed coming from artisanal mining. But the statistic can be found on the website of the National Ministry of Mine, where there are all the figures per year. Was it? Is it all that I needed to answer?
There's a few questions, but
Okay.
any one of the panelists can jump in on this one. Artisanal mining has been authorized in certain areas in the Congo to support the people who live under the poverty line, like in Mzizi and territory of Mzi. It is also the case in Bukavu and Goma, and in all of Eastern DRC. So I think that's more of a point, actually. But if anyone would like to speak to that in specific areas.
Yeah, maybe, sorry, if I can jump in, just remember the second question. It was regarding a specific law for artisanal mining. Yeah, for the DRC, there are different decrees mining from the National Ministry of Mine that help to the implementation of activities on the ground. But the main laws are the mining code, the previous one in 2002, that have been revised and updated in 2018. This is the main law that is guiding mining activity. But there are practical implementation measures, what we call règlement minier, that accompany the law. And these are the main guidelines. For traceability and due diligence implementation, and DRC level, we have the 2009 manual this year in 2018, February, with the CTC. This is what guides traceability and due diligence implementation on the ground. This is for the DRC context. Now,
well, okay, go ahead. I just want to complete it.
Yeah. Okay, you can add, and then yeah, can come back for the BCC and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for the better understanding of the DRC, actually, there are clear provision within the mining code since 2002, including the mining regulation. There's even a very specific annex to the mining regulation. It's called Code of Conduct, showing how diggers can comply with the mining law, the mining regulation. In terms of compliance and different activity, we've seen in 2018, the current, the 2002 mining code has been revised on 9th March 2018. So after the amendment, we've seen two important decrees on actually what I said. They set up a public national company actually under leadership of the Minister of Mining. And they will be buying cobalt straight from diggers. And the issue, they try to put some exclusivity, and that raised some concern at international level for traders, etc., etc. So there are clear provision. There's no lack of regulation within the legal framework in the DRC. Of course, there are soft law. We have different NGO trying to push to put in place in terms of human rights assessments, environmental right assessment, or the Global Compact and different international best practice and initiative at international level. They've been pushing in order different companies to comply with best international practice.
Thank you. We have a question here on rehabilitation. How are the mining sites rehabilitated, and does this happen in the DRC?
So during the, first we need to make it different that actually when you are talking about the closure and the rehabilitation of the sites, we are now talking about industry, we are talking about big mining company, we are not talking about artisanal activities. So when a mining company, after this, making sure that there's a value on the deposits lodged in application for the conversion of his PIA, which is a license of exploration after 5 years. Applying to, there's a regulatory a corporate body, we call it CAMI, CADAS, mining CADAS. When you're applying it and lodging the feasibility study, etc., there's a provision you need to pay for the rehabilitation of the site. So after the life of the mine and different activity, they need actually to comply with very specific key provision and commitment within their own feasibility study, which they lodge with the mining department and the mining cadres, and including a mitigation plan that they already lodged with the same entity, and of course the environmental studies. So there's a clear plan and provision within those three documents that they are following up and making sure that they need to comply with such a clear commitment. And of course, at institutional level, their audits need to be conducted to make sure that actually they're complying with such commitment and provision and regulation. So need to make difference. So that's also bring usually the usual question about can a artisan mine can be in the same site than a mining company. So the law make it clear that when there's a space, a very specific space, which is not allocated to a mining company, and you can actually mine it with best international standards as a mine. Actually, a mining cooperative can apply by exception to have what they call a ZA, which it's a zone of artisanal miners. So that need to be a mining cooperative, and with such exception, they can. So then come the issue of coming back of how they are going to rehabilitate the sites. So of course, there's a clear provision within environmental law, etc., that they need to go through in order to comply.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question.
Aysha, I wanted to answer to the question regarding Misisi.
Go for it.
Yeah, Misisi, it's in South Kivu. Misisi, there are places where artisanal and especially gold artisanal mining is taking place. Initially, it's what we call PE, industrial mining concession, but where artisanal miners went and flew in and starting producing gold. But there are still some struggling with the industrial company pulling out of that area. So there are many places, especially in the east part of DRC, where artisanal mining is taking place. As Jahziel just mentioned, you need to have a ZA that is created. So it's an artisanal mining zone that is created in order for a cooperative to produce mineral. But generally what will also happen, because there's no geological researches, miners will discover a place where they could dig and produce mineral, and then they regroup into a cooperative and send a request in Kinshasa for the National Ministry of Mine to create a ZEA that will include that specific location. So in practice, generally, this is what happened. But for rehabilitation of artisanal mining areas, there is in the law, there is a provision saying that, among the taxes that are paid by the cooperatives, 5% is dedicated to rehabilitation. So the government have to set it apart, but we don't know if this is taking place.
So I saw a question on the value chain, Aysha.
Go for it.
Okay, so also that gives some trends actually on in terms of business model in artisanal miner in the DRC. We've seen, for instance, if you are Googling a company called Cobalt blockchain, they are listed in stock venture in Toronto. Actually, what they put in place, it's just a supply agreement with a mining cooperative. So diggers, as member of the mining cooperative, actually they are providing commodities, raw material to a smelter. That company on the smelter and has in place a supply agreement, and then they are processing it and they are selling it at international level. So these are new trends actually on the ground. We've seen local company also doing the same, providing equipment and proper equipment to diggers and hiring diggers, making sure that diggers are working on that ZA, that specific zone, and they are collecting raw materials, and so they are processing it through the smelters and plants. So, which is making the three people they can buy actually from diggers. A mining company cannot buy straight from artisanal miner. So then you have traders, you have mining cooperative, and the buying shop who actually they can buy different product from diggers and different mine activity. So they also can apply for transports of artisanal products. They can sell them to a smelter. So in terms of value chain, it's the normal value chain.
Thank you so much. So we're at the end of the forum, but I was wondering if I could just have a round of a very brief answer from each of the panelists to this question. What would you say is the most important thing for cooperative in regional sectors in Africa to get on board with artisanal mining? How do we support regional developments with specific interests with the DRC? Sorry, that didn't come out very elegantly, but I think generally, what would you say is the role of regional organizations in supporting capacity development with regards to artisanal mining in the DRC?
So I can start, Robert can, yeah. So regarding development of artisanal activity in the DRC, so the fact that, like it or not, there are development of artisanal activities in the DRC. So they are also on the ground. There are clear provision within the law. So you need actually to work with. And one of the important things we've seen some international NGOs such as Pact International, we've seen, for instance, some initiative from the German government in terms of building, capacity of diggers, trying to help mothers and kids being on the ground, empowerment them into different activities, helping them actually to learn ABC, French, and calculation. So I think we've seen very interesting key figures in terms of improvement, especially in Kolwezi region. You can see actually how people are using the income coming from this kind of activity to send kids to school, actually to start small business, etc. And after COVID, actually it's now a concern how it's very difficult for them to go through different mining sites, and in terms of GDP, they will review in terms of what will be the DRC, and even in 2021, we know that in terms of the revenue, capital tax, etc. So a lot of issues, and I think DRC at this point needs really support from international NGO, international institution actually to help how to design the best model in terms of how they are going to help those people on the ground.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I may add, we still need international intervention, and in order for us to mitigate a lot of risk. One of the biggest risk is fueling war in the Eastern DRC, specifically. As I mentioned before, a lot of cross-border flowing to export to neighboring country. This is very specific to the gold sector, because gold have high value for little volume, and it can be smuggled quite easily. So neighboring country applying different export tax. DRC, it's 2% export tax, but in most of neighboring countries, less than 1%. So there's a need for international pressure for downstream player to start intervening in estimating the risk. We are trying to work with different cobalt and copper sector implemented in the burden on artisanal miners. Yeah, but at regional level, there's a security issue that need to be addressed with the artisanal mining fueling war and insecurity in the region. Regional consensus need to be addressed or to address the exports tax issue, but also interference of a neighboring country in the eastern part of DRC.
For me, I think regarding your question, so for me the most important thing is funding. So those international organizations, they can help by just trying to they can just enabling the government to give funding to those mining cooperatives so that they can really kind of buy adequate equipment so they can increase their own production. And when they increase the kind of the production, the mining production, this will have an impact on artisanal miners, and they will have kind of more benefits, more profits, and they will kind of better their life. So it's for me, it's mostly funding. So if those international organizations can really kind of support the government in the formalization of the artisanal mining sector, to shift this sector to a kind of a bigger scale where they have good, adequate equipment so that they can increase their production, and then we'll have kind of this will reduce all those challenges that have kind of we've been talking about. For example, the environmental concerns, child labor, those problems that have been affecting the artisanal mining sector in DRC. So I think if they can found mining cooperative, most of this problem will just disappear and things will be better for artisanal miners. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really want to extend a deep thanks to the three panelists. I really appreciate the information that you've given us. And I look forward to our next session with you in a month or so. And yes, the recordings are all on YouTube. So I'll send a link out a little bit later. But yeah, thank you so much. And I hope you guys have a lovely Thursday going forward. I mean,
Thank
Wednesday,
you so much.
sorry. They're all blending these days.
Thank you, Aysha.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you very
everyone.
much. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.